And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is dissolving. And we're going to be talking about dissolving in the context of our fears and anxieties, rather than trying to overpower or deny or um, encapsulate these aspects of ourselves that challenge us, to enable instead for them to dissolve so that we can better metabolize them and incorporate them in our being as part of our being. So should be an interesting conversation. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you back with us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Before we get started talking about dissolving, let's take a couple minutes to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out and illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present, right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, dissolving. You know, we have so much language of warfare. Like we want to vanquish our fears, conquer our fears, overcome our anxiety. And it goes on, right? Where we're waging war against ourselves or our life experience. And there's so much to be said for allowing, instead of trying to overcome these things, instead of trying to deny them or compartmentalize them or exile them, there's a lot to be said for allowing them to dissolve. I looked up the definition of dissolve just to be sure, but what was interesting is that it talked about allowing something to go into solution, like to become part of like a liquid form into solution. And there's a wonderful double entendre there, to be moving something into solution, like creating a solution, which is kind of a neat thing, you know, like solving something, but also to allow something to go into solution so that it gets metabolized. And what I'm talking about in terms of metabolizing something is creating an integration, to be able to resolve something, to bring it to a point of completion, to be able to integrate it into the whole. And it's fascinating to me to see in the core connection work I do with people, it's fascinating to me to see how deep trauma can get resolved, how it actually dissolves. It's not like it got obliterated. It's not that it got overpowered or it's not even a rational process necessarily. What it is creating a new context for something such that it then has the it's then able to be integrated in a very different way. So if you can imagine, for instance, a clump of flour, I don't know, a clump of some kind of powder that's clumped up. Water is such an incredible solvent, right? And for us, water is a life source, right? For the creatures living on this planet, we need water, right? But it dissolves things. It's the foundation of our life in so many ways, and it dissolves things. It's a solvent, solving. So the way that water works, maybe we should have been talking about water today. I don't know. We are anyway. Maybe I should have called it water, is what I'm saying. The way that water works is really quite miraculous, something that we don't think about, that we kind of take for granted. Like, why is water such an amazing solvent? I don't have the answers, by the way. I'm not a chemist or microbiologist, or but it's amazing to me how water in its many states will just sort of in a running river will wear away the hardest of stones over time, right? Just that constant motion. That so Rosalind says our bodies are 70% question mark water. I know it's a super high percentage. It might be more than 70%, but when we think about allowing things to go into solution, to dissolve, to be sort of worn away or broken apart, even that language is kind of has its violence to it, you know, in talking about broken. But there's a gentleness that is available to us in our work of transformation that feels like flow. Again, back with water, that feels natural, that feels whole, maybe, or that wholeness. So one of the ways that things can get dissolved really readily in terms of our personal growth and evolution is through reframing. And reframing is a super, super powerful tool where we use our cognitive capabilities to our own advantage, to redirect something. We've been talking about neuroplasticity lately, and neuroplasticity isn't a positive or a negative. It's just the way that we work, that we learn things, we create new neural pathways, we create new synapses to that impact our way of being, our way of thinking. And we can take deliberate steps toward directing this superpower that we have to reconfigure or reconceptualize, repattern ourselves and our relationship to the world. So reframing is something as simple as, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? And that's really kind of a classic to look at a perspective from which we view life. So these ideas, these beliefs, these patterns that we have of thinking and being, and the patterns that we have for creating a context of our experience in the world, is very malleable. We tend to believe that beliefs are true. And culturally, we've been confronted with so many opportunities to challenge that assumption, right? That we've all been caused to question what's true, what's real, what's not real, where we have so many examples of blatant contradiction, where it reminds me of a story of my my father and my brother growing up. Oh my gosh. I know, I think it might have been a cigarette. We'll just say it was a cigarette, but the situation was, my brother had a cigarette, we'll say, and my father said to him, "What are you doing smoking? You know, what are you doing with that cigarette?" And my brother was there with this cigarette, and he said, "What cigarette?" What cigarette? And you know, like the cognitive dissonance that created for my father, I think he ended up speechless. I don't know what the exact outcome of that situation was, but that's kind of what we're living through in our culture, where people are denying the actual existence of, you know, something that is, it's like right there, it's visible, it's provable, and then there's this denial, like right in the open. So it's caused a cognitive dissonance, I think, for so many of us. And so there's this idea, there was an idea that what's true is true, that our beliefs are who we are. That's another really interesting thing to be noticing, how so many of us really, really identify with our beliefs. We're very invested in our beliefs, like that's how things are. And our beliefs then shape the lens through which we experience and interpret the world. And the thing is that these beliefs are mutable. And we can see that in the extreme case, for example, when people are brainwashed, they're made to believe things that are clearly manipulated. And I guess we could say that about us, right? We could say that about us in our culture, that we are being brainwashed all the time by media, by advertisement, by the stories that we consume. So it's very, very interesting to notice all of these programming elements in our culture. I was having and by the way, just to bring this back around to dissolving, what we're talking about is dissolving dissolving as much of these imposed programs and beliefs as possible to get to our own essence, to dissolve the things that are between us and the authentic expression of our being. So I had this conversation with a friend who was talking about another friend, just sort of trying to give me an intro to this person. And they were talking about the vigilance of this other person in investigating credentials, shall we say. We'll just talk about credentials. So when we talk about credentials, we're also talking about convention, right? Like, how are we making meaning? How are we defining worth and value? So, for example, do the letters after someone's name, like MD or PhD or LSW or Esquire, or what do those attributions, what do those credentials mean? What do we make them mean? Does it make someone more intelligent? Does it reflect integrity? Does it hopefully it reflects a certain level of knowledge, hopefully, but does it reflect competency necessarily? We would hope so. In so many cases, we would hope that the credentials that a person has are an indicator of expertise and excellence, but we've all experienced, I imagine, we've all experienced credentialed people's ineptitude, or like doctors who have no bedside manner, for example, or very little compassion. So credentials, or somebody, for instance, that is super intelligent in one area but not in others. So what do those credentials represent? Other credentials might be interpreted to be like, what are we wearing? What designer, for example, might you be wearing? And the in certain circles, I get that this is maybe a way that certain people can assess other people in terms of like, what is the meaning that we make for these these kinds of lenses through which we look at the world. So, what occurred to me is what does it look like to dissolve our dependency on externalities? It means, maybe these filters that we use to perceive the world, maybe they get us in a ballpark, but they also might be keeping us from a rich experience, a full experience. Maybe they're limiting our experience as much or more than they are expanding it. What does it mean when we say, well, when we can only, it's awkward speaking about this, because truly, we can only see the world through our prejudices. And until we start exposing our prejudices to ourselves, and until we start recognizing these prejudices that are operative, and whether it's, we can say prejudices because those prejudices are beliefs, or have beliefs underlying them. We can say beliefs. When we operate with these foundational assumptions that are unquestioned, we are not the stewards, we're not the conscious stewards anyway of our own lives. And so being alert to and dissolving our blindness to these prejudices is a very, very powerful thing. Like dissolve, and so much of our sense of self, again, talking about the attachment to these beliefs, these prejudices, these attitudes, these behaviors, as we're able to dissolve our connection, dissolve our attachment to those things, maybe reframe them in a profound way, what might be available to us. So I have this friend who who introduced me to a group that I'm working with, and the intention was to become more aware of the impacts, the unconscious prejudices relating to race and gender and the patriarchy and all kinds of things like that. And so we talked earlier today about how reframing can be a super powerful way to allow things to dissolve. And so what happened was, we in having conversation with this one person, it became really clear to them. They got to see a different perspective on a certain relationship dynamic that blew open this whole experience of how deeply enmeshed they were in the patriarchy, seeing certain prejudices that they had never ever seen before. And it started gaining its own momentum, and now they're seeing more and more and more of these situations that had been completely unconscious, which the foundation for those prejudices and for those unconsciously held beliefs, the foundation is now dissolving, and they are metabolizing it in a way that is very different from I'm going to fight this, that, or the other thing. It's working within them. It's gaining its own momentum. So Rosalind says credentials give credit to what a person says about subject matter they're an expert of. So a person can take what they say as truth, but when we do that to a degree, we don't use our own critical thinking. Yes, yes, yes. So we have a bias toward credentials, right? So Rosalind says standing in your own truth looks like ... Yeah. So we have a bias toward credentials, and that bias is usually will give people the benefit of a doubt around credentials, but we have certain conventional credentials, and then we have certain things that don't have letters after them that are also credentials. And so what is that? What does it mean? Like, what kind of bias do we have that says somebody with a PhD is better or more intelligent than somebody who, for instance, is a farmer? You know, that's kind of a conventional notion, but doesn't make a whole lot of sense, really. Someone, they're, what is intelligence? You know, what kind of, are we look, it's a whole big conversation, right? But why is somebody, and I don't, why would culture believe or give more worth, ascribe more worth to someone who has letters after their name, PhD, for example, as over somebody who doesn't? It's a really interesting question. I think it's a really interesting question. And one of the things that we can recognize is that there's an area of specialty, hopefully, that person has excelled in, but what does that mean? Or specialized in, but what does that mean beyond that narrow context? And even within that context, you know, we get to look at these biases, and we have them about pretty much everything, and they're usually invisible. And as we become more aware of them, we allow them to dissolve. As we reframe them, as we question them, even as we shine light on them, sometimes the light itself dissolves. So with that, that's it for today. I think it's really interesting to be looking at our assumptions and what the meaning that we make about so many things. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel, as well as my Facebook page. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And it's always, always, always a privilege to be playing with, discovering, observing, questioning, exploring. It's always a privilege to do that with you and in this venue. So much, much gratitude. And until next time, so much love to you.